Thank you, Steve. And Michael, if you can go to the next slide. So, listen, folks, this is really, I'll call it the most important parameter. I know, we're going to get to your questions. I see all your questions. And by the way, I know you each can't see each other's questions. We're keeping, the questions anonymous so we protect people's personal privacy with regards to their issues, their statements, their opinions, their beliefs. I mean, I've gotten all kinds of stuff already, political views included. And some of the questions, absolutely, we won't be able to address. They're just not appropriate in this forum, or we can address because of maybe pending litigation and the like. But we're definitely going to get to your questions and try to answer as best we can, as many as we can. And if we don't get to them, we'll talk about how to follow up after the fact. But, getting feedback from you is absolutely critical for us as we move forward in this endeavor to find and create the path forward for energy across Aquidneck Island. The options we just highlighted, those are the most prudent, responsible, reliable, safe options we're presenting. I know other people have different thoughts and suggestions. We want to hear those. We want to hear all your feedback. And the website that we've prepared and the feedback form that you can see on the screen, that circle, if you go to the website, we want you to put your opinion in there. We want to capture that. We are going to be synthesizing a summary of all that feedback as part of our process to create the overall, path forward and the solution that will ultimately favor. We haven't really done this sort of approach before. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. We're trying to include the voice of the community in what we're doing and what we want to pursue as a collective group, not just what National Grid's, interest might be in one form or fashion. It's what's best for the community, what's best for the overall goals of the state in alignment with our clean energy goals, with the governor's goals, all of that included. And so, right down to the fact that some of you have already stated, just give me gas and keep it cheap, put the pipe in, to, no new gas, stop, put a moratorium in place. We hear it all and we want to hear it all. And so please submit your feedback. It's the only way your voice will be heard or included in the process as we narrow in on a solution overall. So let me just talk about, again, we have well over 50 questions that have been asked, either pre-submitted or as part of the presentation, and I'm going to try to get through as many of those as possible. But as folks were speaking and presenting, I try to kind of categorize a few of them and put them in certain buckets, if you will. And I definitely will lean on some of my subject matter expert colleagues to help address some of those overall. First, let me just talk about the Oatmeal Lane site and its current kind of operation and modifications. There's been questions about noise, lighting, access, and that sort of overall portfolio. And we have made improvements to the site, and we will continue to make improvements to the site to ensure that we have the minimal impact possible. By the way, one quick note: there was a question around, do we have zoning approval to operate there? It is our property, and yes, we did get a zoning certificate from Portsmouth, back in 2018. So we've met the zoning requirements. But the site itself, we understand that we have residential impacts, in the vicinity of the facility. So this year alone, we put in a new electrical service, so we wouldn't have to run a generator to help minimize that overall noise. Lighting concerns, we're trying to focus the lightings, but bear in mind, lighting is important for security reasons too, so we can't dampen the lighting too much because we need it to be very visible for our security forces and the monitoring and all of the different equipment that we have to monitor the site for safe operation. So we'll continue to do the best we can. We've tried to put up some additional trees and greenery and that sort of thing. So, but those things take time to grow in, and we'll continue to work with our local residents and the municipality overall, and what more we can do to again dampen the impacts of its operation as it occurs. And remember, some of you, we presented those options, and one of the options is keeping kind of the status quo at Oatmeal Lane. So for 15 years, honestly, we want to have to operate that long if we don't have to. We don't want to be there, period. I mean, we're really at that point where, as Steve highlighted, not only for capacity purposes, but for vulnerability. And we all know what happened over a year and a half ago with our gas outage. When we have an upstream transmission issue of the like or of any sort, we want to provide extra protection and security and reliability. And so that old mill lane operation there is there to help us protect from any potential upstream vulnerabilities in addition to capacity overall. So it's important that, people understand that we don't take it lightly. We don't want to impede. We don't want to interfere with, folks' residential overall lifestyle, if you will, and the impacts there. And we're trying to keep it as minimal as possible. But we're also making sure we provide safe and reliable service to all our customers and to all residents and businesses across Aquidneck Island. So the site itself, let me just hand it over real quick to Dan again on the site itself. And Dan, if you want to maybe bring in Brian or Phil, if they have any other comments about the actual modifications to the site and what more we're doing to try to hamper or mitigate the overall impacts to the area residents with regards to noise and sound. Maybe talk about the operation of, our when we do normal maintenance type activities or venting and that sort of thing for protection purposes.
Yeah, sure, Brian. I'm not sure if Brian or Phil are able to see some of the questions that are coming in, being that they're observers, essentially not panelists. But so like you mentioned, this year we opted to tie into the electrical grid and do away with the baseload generator that was running last year. So that should help with some of the background noise. Some of the more consistent noise from the generator running 24/7. We also last year we made sure that as far as blowdown activities, which is a requirement, it's an operational requirement for maintaining these storage tanks. Every so often we do need to blow down the pressure, and I can understand it's a loud process. We've implemented different strategies to try and minimize the noise, controlling some of the blowdown pressures and things of that nature. We've only performed those operations during daylight hours, so that should help, during business hours. Things like that hopefully try to help some of the noise. Also some of the fencing and screening that was used on the fence helped a little bit with the projection of that noise and decibel level. I'm not sure if Phil or Brian are able to speak to this. Like I said, I don't know how much they can actually see in terms of the questions that are coming in, but if they can speak to some of the operations that we performed to try and mitigate some of that noise issue. Brian or Phil, you guys able to get on? Okay. And if not, we can certainly follow up with that. But essentially, what I've described, and it's this winter, we're trying to learn from last year and trying to minimize, trying to do what we can as far as what we have flexibility to adjust and help with some of the inconveniences and noise and stuff like that. I hope I was able to answer that, Brian.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. And again, we're not finished. We'll continue to work with our area residents and continue to look at other options for ensuring that we, again, make sure that we minimize noise and lighting and so forth as much as possible. Again, ultimately, as I said previously, do we want to have to operate at Old Mill Lane? No, we don't. So, whatever the best path forward for us, for the community, is something we're making sure we take into consideration with the hope that we wouldn't have to operate Old Mill Lane in the long term. But that's yet to be determined. There's a lot of questions around moratorium on gas. And certainly that's an option, and you should put that sort of feedback in your form. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure we provide a prudent and responsible means of providing energy for all customers. Naturally, there would be quite a few people opposed to a moratorium overall, and that moratorium obviously would have significant impacts on the economic development profile of Aquidneck Island. Now, there are other options to gas, absolutely, and people have voiced those opinions and should continue to. We could look at options of requiring every new construction project to go to heat electrification, for example, right? That's an option, and those are the kind of things that we want to hear from you overall. But again, the options that we're presenting tonight, we believe are the most prudent and responsible options overall for a truly long-term and enduring energy solution. The other thing with the moratorium, I'd just like to say, again, realize a moratorium on gas only impacts new gas accounts. We are in and at a situation where we have to ensure reliability of existing customers. So that vulnerability aspect that Steve highlighted, not just the coldest days of the year that could occur, that capacity constraint that we also are realizing with Old Mill Lane, but it's that vulnerability. So even with a gas moratorium, we're still in a situation where we need to operate Old Mill Lane at the end of the day. So I just wanted to make that known. There have been a lot of questions on, I'll just call it the Navy and the Navy site. And many of you on the call are familiar that we did have and do have a lease on a Navy-based property that expires in 2026. And that lease and the operating agreement therein allowed us to do peak shaving. Peak shaving is where we can plan to send in LNG truck to provide some temporary relief at certain times of the year. And that's planned. Again, that's a forecasted type of operation where you're coming in necessarily to do 2 or 3 days of injection to help that forecasted scenario. That's the operating agreement we have with the Navy. That's the scenario of which we operate with the Navy. What we have at Old Mill Lane is not a forecasted, pre-planned type of scenario that I would highlight as peak shaving. And that's why it's a challenge for us right now to even consider the Navy. We have worked with the Navy, and the Navy has been very collaborative on looking at options and moving forward and providing a long-term enduring solution. And that's why that's one of the options that we presented tonight is, looking at a new LNG opportunity on Navy property. And that's something we would absolutely continue to entertain if that's the more favorable option as we move forward. But just saying that we can move everything over to the Navy, we don't have an operating agreement to that. And it's not necessarily the local Navy personnel opposition to it, but just a federal restriction and our lease requirement for us to operate over there. And we've attempted to modify that and just been unsuccessful overall in modifying the lease to turn it into something that would allow us unrestricted access, if you will, 24/7, roll in a new LNG tank as needed at any time of the day for a period of about 3 or 4 months. And by the way, there has been questions about how long, we're at Old Mill Lane. We're really only operating through the months, or set up to operate, I should say, through the months of December through March. We'll begin mobilizing in November. We'll be operational in December, and we'll be standing by for that capacity and that vulnerability until the end of March, and then we'll begin to demobilize in April as the heating season is concluding. So that's what, again, working with the Navy is a critical element of our path forward, and we will continue to work with the Navy. And again, we have a very collaborative and favorable relationship, and looking for a responsible and long-term enduring solution for the island. The next category, I'll just bucket as safety and safe operations and understanding, what are the safe protocols. And again, I touched on this after Dan spoke, and we've worked very closely with the local municipalities, and to help develop the right safety procedures and protocols. So in that extremely rare incident, the 1 in 10 million chance there's some sort of incident, at the facility, there are procedures established to handle those. There are processes, and we've worked very closely with the fire departments to ensure that those are in place. So certainly we welcome continued collaboration, coordination with the fire departments. I can't necessarily speak on behalf of all of those elements, since it's really the local fire departments who manage and maintain those operating procedures. But I'll just say they're procedures that you would have for any type of facility that requires this sort of enhanced, I'll call it safety protocols in place. And any additional follow-up that we're happy to work and will continue to work with the local fire department and personnel overall. Okay, so those are kind of some big buckets of questions, and I'm trying to just get to the top, and now I'm going to go through as many of these that I can address, and I'll share them with my colleagues to hopefully inject information as appropriate. So let me see. The next question, just rolling down my list here. So there was a pre-submitted question regarding the Energy Facility Siting Board. So the Energy Facility Siting Board is the jurisdictional authority in the state that if you will, regulates or oversees and approves energy facilities. And the intent of those is, generally speaking, power plants and we'll call it more permanent infrastructures. And we are in the process of working with the Energy Facility Sightings Board on getting a clarification on their oversight of what we call temporary facilities, such as the one at Old Mill Lane. So we are not vacating the EFSB's jurisdiction. And somebody had a question that it appeared like we were trying to get out of the EFSB's jurisdiction. We are not doing that. We are merely getting a clarification on oversight of these temporary facilities versus major energy facilities. So, applications and working with the EFSB is a very lengthy process. It takes several months to prepare, several months to go through the decision-making process. These temporary operations of LNG at Old Mill Lane, can be deployed very quickly. In some cases, in emergency purposes. In the case of Old Mill Lane, we're being extra responsible, if you will, by having it staged in case of any contingency sort of scenario. But in general, I just wanted to make clear that our current work with the EFSB is seeking clarification on oversight of temporary versus permanent facilities. There was a question submitted, Dan. I'm going to kind of roll this over to your team on how many temporary LNG facilities we have in the state or across New England. And I don't know if you have that off the top of your head, if you have it readily available, but I'll throw that to you, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I do not have an exact number. I do know we operate, seasonally, we do operate portable sites, mainly on the Cape, Massachusetts. But that's the extent of my familiarity with it. Okay.
And that's something we'll take note of. I think we can do a follow-up on to confirm that for the person who requested it. And similarly, there was one, does Narragansett and Providence have LNG facilities? Of course, we have other LNG facilities in the state. Dan, maybe you want to highlight some of those. Most of those are more of a permanent nature, but maybe you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, sure. And actually, going back on that, we do operate portable storage at Cumberland LNG. So we do have another facility in Rhode Island that's a portable facility, if you want to call it that. As far as LNG peak shaving facilities, yes, we do have facilities in Rhode Island, Providence mainly, and also Exeter.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to my next question. I'm just trying to make sure I pull it up. There was a question regarding study on, or within our study, there was no reference of market-based supply solutions of other options regarding Canaport or Accelerate. And I'm not as familiar with this one overall, so I'm going to refer to one of my colleagues, Liz. You want to take this question with regards to how or why we haven't included supply solutions from Canaport or Accelerate? Are you there, Liz? Oh, she just got bumped. Okay, you know what? We're going to go back to that one. Let me move on to the next one. Okay, you're back, Liz? Okay. There was a question pertaining... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, this is Mary Beth Carroll, Brian. Do you want me to take that one about Canaport and Accelerate?
Sure. Thanks, Mary Beth.
So, my name is Mary Beth Carroll. I work in the gas supply department for Narragansett Electric. Canaport and Accelerate both would require pipeline transportation to be usable at Aquidneck Island. So we would need to flow gas through one of the interstate pipelines in order to get it there. So it would be upstream of any constraints that we have.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and Liz, you're back on. I think Mary Beth covered it, though.
Oh, great. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Nope, not a problem. Okay. And again, I apologize. I'm trying to, there's so many questions and a lot of them are related to things we've already covered. So maybe I don't miss any key items that might have been asked as we go through them. There was a question around, does the cost of the new pipeline include assumed connection costs for the anticipated new gas customers, or are you counting that separately? And maybe, Steve, I don't know if we might have that answer from as regard to the study for the new pipeline, and Liz may be able to interject on that as well.
Sure, Brian, this is Steve. So we included in the cost analysis of the options the things that are different across all of them. And so since the solutions were assumed, aside from the non-infrastructure solutions, since they were all assumed to support our projected gas demand growth, there was no variation across the different options in terms of customer connections, and so they were essentially out of scope, right? Not relevant to the decision-making process. In terms of the non-infrastructure solution, we would include the cost of the incentives to try and defer or kind of like divert any new customers towards heat electrification, and then convert a lot of existing gas customers to electric heat pumps.
Okay, thank you, Steve. There's been a couple of questions on, I'll call the LNG operations, and a lot of questions, a lot of interest on other LNG operations in residential areas, and can we get a map and addresses of those locations and so forth. So I know we don't have those answers readily available, but we can follow up with those parties who have asked. As much as we can disclose that information, we'll continue to forward on that. Let's see. There's a question on who's the largest consumer of gas on the island. I'm not sure if we're allowed to publicly state that. I don't know. Are we able to say that, Liz? That might be a privacy matter.
Yeah, Brian, we typically don't share that information.
Okay. And again, a lot of questions on, the safety protocols around the Oatmeal Lane area, and why we're not focused on the Navy base and the like. And I'm trying to be as transparent as possible on, making sure that you all are aware that we do understand that you have concerns. And, LNG, it's a fossil fuel. It's the cleanest fossil fuel. And actually, like many other things, there are risks involved with any type of fossil fuel. So we don't take that lightly. So I just like to remind folks that, absolutely the reason we have safety and security procedures and processes and personnel and training and so forth are to ensure that we continue to operate. And I'll just, be honest with you folks, if you want to Google, LNG safety parameters, you're going to see that LNG is a safe operation. Actually, I think the last time there was a tank type of incident was in 1944, and it's the famous one where it's called the Cleveland incident. That was during a time of World War II when construction standards for tanks were nothing like they are today. They actually attribute a lot of the challenges with that incident due to subgrade materials, which is obviously 80 some years ago has absolutely changed in with regard to all things in life, right? Safety parameters on many things. You look at your vehicles, right? How many additional safety safeguards are in place? So, I don't know how much more to speak on this topic, and I certainly understand there are a few of you who are really concerned. And we can certainly continue to meet with you and make sure you understand in conjunction with the local fire department to ensure your safety concerns are addressed. We take safety as first and foremost and paramount above everything we do. And we want to make sure you understand that we are doing everything to ensure that operation of Old Mill Lane or any of our facilities is taken with safety first. Okay. And again, the Navy base keeps coming up. Understand. Is there a yearly exercise? Let me throw this one over to maybe Dan and Gary. Yearly exercises regarding gas drills, if you will, or gas emergency exercises. I can tell you, by the way, also that we have had the fire departments visit our sites. They know the site, they know the constructs of it, and so forth. But as far as yearly exercises, and maybe even specifically at Old Mill Lane, Dan, any comment on that, or Gary?
Yeah, Brian, we do conduct seasonal. We only stage the site seasonally, so we do perform comprehensive site tours and drills with the local fire departments. That's the extent we go over what the security measures are, the emergency plans, where the shutdown stations are, and stuff like that. So we do go over that once the site is mobilized and staged.
And Brian, from emergency planning's perspective, so the Old Mill Lane site hasn't been the specific subject of an annual exercise. As I stated last year, we were in Narragansett. This year, we're actually not in a community. We're actually going to be exercising on October 27th a gas load shed due to a transmission supply interruption that impacts us as a customer to that transmission supply. And we're using this as an opportunity to exercise and evaluate our response organization to 2 new plans that are very specific to gas load shed.
Thank you, Gary. There's another question here on National Grid did so well getting people to switch from oil to gas that now sometimes demand outpaces supply. Will National Grid incentivize customers to switch to electric heat and cooling, i.e. heat pumps? And I think this may have been asked prior to us covering the material, but that is absolutely included as one of our options, the non-infrastructure options. But as Steve highlighted, the policies and the mechanisms of which those incentives would occur have yet to be developed. Steve, any other comment on that? Time frames, we're talking years, right? Likely for the policies, for those kind of policies to put in place. But as far as what those incentives might look like or how they might be unveiled is yet to be determined.
Yeah, that's right, Brian. I'll just add that is essentially if you look at the study, providing incentives to customers for adopting electric heat pumps is the core of the non-infrastructure option, right? And so that would be the primary mechanism that we analyze for reducing gas demand on Aquidneck Island. And as you noted, there is no current regulatorily approved program by which National Grid could do that. So if we were to go down that road, we'd need to work with our regulators in the state to figure out how we could structure such a program and how to design those incentives and how to recover those costs. That is the essence of the non-infrastructure option.
Thank you, Stephen. There's a question here on National Grid's regulatory rate of return for gas infrastructure projects, and I can only presume maybe the question is looking at or potentially motivating factors of where National Grid might be looking to earn additional profit or the like, and I can tell you overall, and Steve did talk about the cost recovery mechanisms lightly, at least, that they vary across the different options, and some of those options have no rate of return on equity, such as the Old Mill Lane, or even if we were to pursue in conjunction with our transmission supplier a new pipeline alternative. That transmission pipeline is not National Grid's pipeline. We don't own, maintain, or operate that pipeline. So we partner and collaborate with our transmission supplier and provider with regard to that. So any infrastructure improvements is, something that would be related to that transmission owner, if you will. But there are mechanisms for capital infrastructure that if we were to pursue, there would be a rate of return, and it is a publicly distributed information. So, our last multi-year distribution rate was 9.275% for our return on equity for infrastructure type of capital projects. So I think I addressed that pretty well. And any of my colleagues, any additional comments on that topic? Steve, anything else? I think I covered it.
Nope, nothing to add, Brian.
Okay. There was a few questions about just public open house, and I know some folks are eager to see what everybody else is asking, and some folks are kind of disappointed in the forum, if you will. I just want to say, would we prefer to do this in person? Absolutely. That was our plan in March. We had a public open house prepared at the Middletown high school, I think it was, or middle school. And so, those mechanisms were in place for us to meet in person so that you could vocalize. This is not our preferred platform to present either. And it's newer for us in this kind of format. So we'll certainly look to approve on this. And maybe there is a means for which we can show the questions. A lot of people have asked, can we see what everybody else is asking? And that makes sense. And so we'll see if we can find a way to post all the questions that were asked and our responses to that. I think that's a fair question, and that's a responsible one, as we're trying to be as transparent as possible with regard to our approach overall. And again, I apologize that we have to do this in a virtual type of setting. It's just obviously the requirements with regard to COVID or the pandemic mandate that such a gathering of this size would require it as such. Okay. There was a question around safety studies performed by any federal, state, or local agencies on the mobile vaporization equipment that is being deployed. Dan, can you talk a little bit about regarding, and then this is transport trailers or mobilization of mobile regasification units?
Hey, Brian, sorry, I'm having audio issues. Can you repeat that?
The regard to, there's a question on mobile safety studies on mobile vaporization equipment that is being deployed, and I think this is pertaining to the driving of transport trailers and mobile gasification units, as far as the code requirements or standards.
Yeah.
Maybe
as
our
far
vendor
as
can, yeah.
Yeah, I would lean on a vendor for that. I mean, as far as any kind of safety studies. I think I remember seeing that coming through. Obviously, the equipment has to comply with different regulations and codes. Over the road type of mobile equipment has to comply with DOT requirements and is DOT certified. We don't handle that as far as National Grid. It's more so on the vendor to do that. We just check to make sure that the equipment is compliant. The vendor is doing their due diligence to make sure that the equipment is kept within compliance. But that's the extent to which I can speak to the over-the-road type of equipment. I know that they have to meet stringent requirements from a design standpoint, but also, they're built to certain standards. I'll say that, and also inspected, through the PUC, so the Rhode Island PUC inspects this equipment. I don't know if I can get maybe I can get Phil Barber to answer this or speak to this. Phil, are you able to get on?
Yeah, Dan, I know that the equipment gets a annual visual inspection, and every 5 years they get hydro tested. Relief valves are tested annually as well, and they do abide by the DOT regulations that you were talking about. If that answers your question.
And maybe similarly, Dan, there's a question regarding tandem trailer, why they're not allowed, or LNG tandem trailer allowed, and tandem tanks parked next to each other.
Okay. I think
LNG tankers.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I'm having audio issues. I caught most of that, Brian. I think I've mentioned that before. DOT and federal motor vehicle carriers standards restrict, based on weight and vehicle length requirements. So there's restrictions there in terms of tandem transport. I'm not an expert on the over-the-road transport type of, regulations. But I don't think it's fair to compare if there are requirements for over-the-road transport. It's a very different, scenario than staging static equipment on a site. So from that respect, I don't think it's not really apples to apples comparison. Again, I can't really speak to the over-the-road requirements for transport of LNG as compared to on-site storage requirements. The risks are not comparable.
Yeah, and I do know of interest. By the way, can Dan just confirm? Can you hear me? Okay, I'm getting some folks saying you can't hear me very well. I want to make sure. I'm trying to hold my mic so that you can hear me.
Yeah, you're coming in pretty.
Okay. Of interest at a federal level, just recently over the summer, there was approval of transporting LNG via railway, and obviously those railway vehicles are, tandem, if you will, but obviously in a much different environment. I think the tandem trucking is a whole different separate issue. I mean, tandem trailers are illegal for a variety of other products, and so they're in many cases they're just illegal flat out. They're not allowed, right? I'm not a DOT expert, but that's based on that's the reading I do. So I don't think the tandem trailer LNG can be correlated to the vicinity of tanks or the likewise, and its concerns on safety of anything of that nature.
Hey, Brian and Dan, do you guys maybe speak a little bit to the DOT rules, the NGA school that they have annually where they train all the trucking companies, that type of stuff? I think that might get to the answer that you're looking for as well.
Yeah, so the trucking of LNG is highly regulated, highly monitored. We actually hire a third party consultant that follows these trucks and sort of scores how the drivers and how the transports happen, and any violations, lane violations, stuff like that, and basically assess how safe the transport happens, and we score really high. Every year, everything is noted, it's transparent. I guess it's through a third party. But again, in terms of transport and tandem, as far as that question goes, there's requirements around over-the-road transport beyond just LNG. Specifically, it just it covers other products as well. There's bridge laws, there's vehicle length and weight laws. So again, like it's not a fair comparison to look at that and assimilate that to a safety concern in terms of storing LNG on a site and multiple storage containers on site. There's really not a direct correlation there, if that makes sense.
So, and let me just, again, I as I'm going through the different questions, there's a lot of questions that I think I've tried to address, but I know people aren't satisfied perhaps with the response, and especially again around the safety procedures and protocols. We work with the local fire departments. We help develop their procedures. I'll just have to say, additional, information on what the fire department does for local emergency procedures and so forth. We'll have to connect with the fire department. I would ask that you work with the fire department to have some of those questions answered, because I'm just not, I'm not knowledgeable enough to give the details of that.
I can help out a little bit. And perhaps Dan hasn't come across this yet, but in the past in Rhode Island, we used to do a lot more trucking of LNG, including to the Navy base, and we were heavily involved with the trucking companies. And they do have an annual school put on by the Northeast Gas Association, where fire departments come and they demonstrate, how to handle an accident on the road. Once it's at the site and in control of the contractor and National Grid's people, it's even more safe. I mean, it's safe on the road, but it's even more safe. And some of the things, if I could tease out some of the things that Dan had mentioned about the extra mile that we go on, auditing the transport to make sure that they're following all the DOT rules. These are very safe transports. They're moved all over New England, really with nobody noticing as well. So hopefully that helps answer some of the questions.
And Brian, this is Faye Brown. Just maybe something to add on the transport, the routes for the transport to Old Mill Lane. If someone can speak, if Dan or the other LNG folks on the call can speak to, we do, those routes are planned. They're not, I know that, Dan, I think you had talked about that at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. So Faye, you're 100% dead on. So those routes are pre-planned. It's based on, it's based on risk of traveling with that transport. It's pre-planned. The first responders are aware of what routes these trucks take, and I want to make sure it's kind of understood what we're talking about here. The question itself is in regards to tandem transportation. So this is dual tanker transportation. That's not a typical thing in LNG in the U.S. We typically just transport, single trailer, tractor trailer configuration, and that's perfectly legal. That's perfectly under, under the DOT regulations. It's regulated. It's certified. So there's no issues there. The question itself was around tandem transportation. So that's a dual trailer setup.
All right, thank you, Dan. I am going to take, unless any of my colleagues who have all help visibility to all the Q&A that's come in as well, unless I've missed a key topic area. I think most of the questions have been a repeat or a more further elaboration on and the like. I'm going to suggest if you have not got a fulfilled answer with regard to your specific question, please use the feedback form on our webpage, or as well, the registration link email that you use, Michael. If you want to share that again, feel free to send that to Michael directly, and we will get those questions. And again, do our best to continue to elaborate and fulfill responses to those. And I apologize if, again, some of these questions aren't fulfilled to your satisfaction. We are trying to do our best to do that. We just don't have necessarily the ability to answer some of them. If it's things like there are a few questions about the outage incident last year, there are still matters there that are in litigation, and we're not allowed to publicly comment about the outage or the after effects of the outage and so forth. So I apologize. I want to make sure I acknowledge that there were some questions regarding that. But certainly, what we can answer, we will take the liberty to do that and ensure that we give you the answer. And other questions we're going to collaborate and defer over to the local Middletown or Portsmouth Fire Department accordingly. That's really more of a joint response than just a national grid response. So with that, let me throw one more plug for our please send feedback. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you want for a future energy option. And the way to do that, again, is that feedback form on our webpage, ngrid.com/Aquidneck. And thank you, Michael, for putting that up on the screen there. Hit that, fill out the form. All of your information is important, and all of your views are important. And we're already getting a wide variety of different comments. So keep that coming so we can help formulate and move forward for reflecting the voice of the community overall. I'm going to give one more opportunity to any of my colleagues. If there are any last comments that any of my colleagues would like to state, if there was a topic that we didn't cover adequately or I missed, I'll ask my colleagues here for a second to chime in. Apologies. It's really in this virtual forum. The questions are streaming in, and if in a live setting, obviously you focus on one question at a time, but it's a little more difficult when everybody's asking. But many of them are very similar and related. So we're not trying to hide the questions. So we'll get these questions out so people can see what they've asked. We just want to be respectful of folks' privacy. All right.
Hey, Brian.
Colleagues, anything else? Yes,
Brian,
go ahead.
There was a question on the LNG barge that seems a little technical. That might just be easiest while we've got Tony on the phone. If you want to flip to him versus
Perfect.
trying to. Yep.
Thanks, Stephen. So I did see that question come along, and it is a very technical question. It asked about, I think it was a while ago, but the question was something along the lines like, "Don't you mean a pipe in a pipe?" And could you explain how that works? So, and then it went on to say, and are there any other examples anywhere where this has been done? So let me answer both those. The pipe in the pipe concept, I think, comes from a person knowing something about Weaver's Cove Energy, which was an LNG terminal project in Fall River that would have gone up the Narragansett Bay. They had gone through many different designs, and one of the last designs that they proposed was an LNG pipe underwater from a jetty. So what they were doing was they were moving the LNG tanker away from the land. And what they would have done is they would have pumped LNG in that pipe to the tanks on land in their proposed project. This is also what's done at Cove Point in Maryland. They have a jetty and a tunnel. That's not what we're talking about here. This barge concept would regasify the gas on the barge and put it into the pipe. So the pipe is just an underwater gas main. It's not an LNG main. So I think that's an important distinction that in our slides You really have to kind of read through the report and to pick that out. The other thing I point out is that this is already in place in Massachusetts Bay. Someone referenced Accelerate Energy. The Northeast Gateway is just this type of design. However, that facility is 100 times bigger than this LNG barge facility. So I was doing the calculations. It's what we were thinking about for an LNG barge was 50,000 decatherms, which is about 1.4% of the size of the Northeast Gateway, which is in Massachusetts Bay. So just to give you some context, we're not talking about bringing in, in this idea, we're not thinking about bringing in a large tanker. It's a much smaller boat, if you will. So hopefully that answers that question. And thank you for the question, by the way.
Okay. Any other my other National Grid colleagues? Okay, very good. Thank you, folks. We appreciate it. I know many of you will have follow-up interest and questions that we will look to address. We look forward to, again, your feedback via the form that we have on our webpage. With that, I will wish you all a pleasant and safe evening. We wish you well, and take care until we meet again. Thank you.